Mr. Lamond.
Yeah.
This is Chet Falzerano.
Uh-huh.
Hi, did I get you a good time here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You got the prospectus on my book, so you know essentially what I'm doing here. This is really just the golden years of Gretsch. I had an interview with Louis Belson about, I guess it's been about 3 weeks ago, and he spoke very highly of you, and I told him that I was going to try and contact you, and he said to say hello if we did work together here. So did Phil Grant. I had an interview with him about a week ago. And
where's Phil Grant, in Vermont?
Yes, he is. He's got a store aptly named Grant's in Vermont that he opened, as you're probably aware, shortly after he left Gretsch.
Yeah, well, I never kept up with him too much, you know, like, he was one of the main reasons why I went with that company, you know. Phil was.
He's quite a remarkable man. It was a wonderful story that I got from him. I knew he was kind of the kingpin of the Gretsch organization, and
yeah. Well, Fred Gretsch was a banker, you know.
Right.
And he didn't know the first thing about a drum.
You're speaking of Fred Gretsch Jr.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just wanted to, our talk here to just be free form. Whatever comes to your mind, let's just talk about. I don't have any particular direction here, although I have some questions that
well, why don't you shoot the questions and I'll see if I can answer them.
Okay. First thing is when you started with Gretsch, the first time you're mentioned in the catalog is in the 1950 catalog.
Yeah. And
then it continues on through 66 was of course the last one that they actually showed endorsers.
Yeah.
But you were there practically the whole time.
Well, not really. Like I used every kind of drum, every drum company there was over my career.
Oh, that's great.
And I tell you one, I was playing the Royal Roost with Woody's band.
What was that? Say that again.
The Royal Roost.
Can you spell that for me?
Just like it sounds. R-O-Y-A-L, Roost, R-O-O-S-T.
Okay.
And it was a big jazz club band, and I was there with the Four Brothers band.
Uh-huh.
And Kenny Clear, let's see, wait a second. Kenny Clark was there with a group, and he was using Gretsch. So I knew the other guy. I was interested in the drums way back because of Joe Jones and Davey, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of guys around New York were using them. So I tried Kenny's set, and I couldn't play on it. Like I put it on the stand, took mine off. I think I was using Ludwig at the time or something. And then I put mine back up there. But then I did go with Gretsch, and I liked the drums, but I could never get a snare drum that suited me. And I found out the reason with Henry Adler that they never had any internal braces in the snare drum, so that when you go to tighten down the head, the shell, you don't realize it, but it bends, and then there's no tension on the head. So I couldn't get the sound I wanted on it. So I had one made from the engineers up there.
At Gretsch.
Yeah, and way back when Davey used Davey and Joe Jones used them, they had the drums with braces internal braces. It's like a barrel hoop. You have to have a brace around it,
At the top and bottom, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, they didn't do that, and then they put out a metal snare drum that had adjustments on both sides, which I didn't like because I liked the drums a lot except for the snare drum. I used a Gretsch, but I used a Rogers snare drum. I have to be truthful with you.
But not in the endorser ads. It looks like a Gretsch snare that they used in the picture, right? Sure. Now, you said that you were playing with Herman?
Woody Herman, yeah.
When you were at the Royal Roost?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that's obviously the band that you were with then when you first started using Gretsch drums, is that correct?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
And
one of the things that has been talked about a lot is the Gretsch drum night at Birdland.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever participate in any of those?
Well, I was down there once, yeah.
Okay. Quite an interesting show, I guess.
I was doing a lot of studio work then. You know, I was on staff at NBC and then ABC and Steve Allen show and all that stuff. You know.
You played the Steve Allen show.
Yeah, sure did. The whole time I was in New York, practically.
What years was that? Do you recall?
In the 50s.
Huh. Great show.
Yeah. Took me 4 years to get some residuals from, which I should have had.
Huh.
I got a letter from Steve Allen in 1990. It says, "Dear Don, good news." I still have the letter. And it said cable companies picked up portions of 100 shows we did. And I had a letter with his lawyer also saying how much residual we were going to get. And it only took me 4 years to get it. Which is beside the point.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Now, you said that Phil Grant was one of the reasons you started with Gretsch. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I like Phil. Yeah, I like him a lot. I used to see Henry Adler all the time, and you know, he was a great drum dealer in New York, and everybody knew him. I think he was very instrumental in helping Buddy Rich when he was very young, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually studying from Henry, you know, just to accomplish some things that I thought I needed, you know. Anyway, I said, "What the hell is the matter with this Gretsch snare drum? I can't get a good sound out of it, you know." And he took the head off and he said, "You see the reason?" He said, "There's no brace in the shell inside." So he said, "Why don't you go talk to Phil about it?" So I did. I went up to the factory in Brooklyn, and so I told it. I asked him. I said, "How about having the engineers make me a Gretsch drum with a brace inside, like that, top and bottom?" So the engineers came in and said, "Well, that's got more ply. That shell's got more plies in it than the average drum." I said, "That doesn't make any difference. How many plies the shell is? There's no brace in it." And then so I told them. So they begrudgingly did it. So I took the snare drum back to Henry Adler, and he put it in his shop just as you walk in, and let guys hit on it. And it was see the other snare drums, they were built right, but they sounded tubby to me. It didn't sound like a snare drum. It sounded like a tom-tom when somebody put snares on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I had him do that. But they didn't. And the original snare drums, that's what they used to be built like. Why they changed, I don't know. I guess they thought they were saving a few bucks, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved the tom-toms and the bass drum and everything. That was the only drawback to me.
One of the things I want to, and I did this with Louis Belson, and it worked real well, was I just started mentioning endorsers, Gretsch endorsers, and just get your thoughts about that person. If you saw him play, you know, what you thought of him technically, you know, the kind of situations he was in. Now, I don't know, when did you actually start playing professionally? How old were you at the time?
I played. I had a little band around Washington D.C. when I was 17. And the first big band I went with was Sonny Dunham, and then Boyd Rabin, and then Woody Herman, of the big bands, you know.
Right.
Then when I came back to New York, I did all kind of different work, you know.
Right. When did you start with Herman's band?
Right at the end of World War II.
Okay.
45.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to read some of these endorsers' names, and you just tell me what your thoughts are about them. The first one is Billy Gladstone. Did you ever have any experience with him?
No, I knew him pretty well. He was really a genius with ideas and everything. He was a great drummer, good technician, and he was a real drum mechanic, you know. He was fantastic. But there's one guy that nobody mentions too much. What the hell is his name? I had a lot of experience, but Gladstone was one of the real daddies, real back, you know. I'll think about it later.
Okay.
Something else.
Okay. How about Chick Webb?
Chick Webb is the only one that I never saw in person or met. Like I met all the other great black drummers, like when I was with Woody's band. Chick Webb was the only one that I never met, which I always regretted.
I'll bet, sure.
Buddy Rich told me that he was the champ. Now, and the guy I was thinking of was a guy named Bill Mather. Did you ever hear that name?
Spell the last name. What is it?
Mather. M-A-T-H-E-R.
Mather. Yes. Yes.
He was when I first met him, I was 17 years old. My father took me up to New York, and a guy named Al Spieldock was playing in a little club in Washington, and I couldn't get any cymbals down there, so I went up and asked him if he could help me, and he wrote me and gave me a note, and he said, if you want good cymbals, you got to go to Mather in New York. So I went up, and he was a Scot, you know, my father was a Scot, and when we went up there, he practically bought the store out, you know, when he heard that broke. Burr, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I first met Bill Mather, and he was, and I was fascinated because he had extra drum sets of every drummer I ever heard of. Chick Webb, Joe Jones, Ray McKinley, Gene Krupa had big trunks of all of them in his place, you know. And no drummer, no big band drummer ever went to anybody but Mather. And he was, there was a genius for you, mechanical genius. And he was also a good snare drummer. He used to go to New Orleans and play in the symphony down there every once in a while. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He's the only one when I was on the road that if I needed a cymbal, I'd call up, describe what kind I wanted, and he'd pick it out. I'd take his choice because I knew it would be right.
Now you were were you using just A's at the time, or were you using K's Zildjians as well?
I was using A's.
Yeah. Did you ever use K's?
Yeah, I've had some.
Okay. Now Mather had backup sets for all the great drummers.
Oh, he had their extra sets, you know, in there. His shop was full of drum sets, you know. I was fascinated. And the funny part, later on, I finally met all those people, you know, and became friends with them. Joe and Sid Catlett, all of them.
To get back to Billy Gladstone, he made custom drums in the 50s. Did he make one for you?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
But he had a, from what I understand, after he died, Mather told me he had a whole building over in Brooklyn full of his material.
Mather did?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder what happened to all that stuff, huh?
I don't damn fine now.
It'd be worth a fortune today, I'll bet.
Sure would, boy. Well, Gladstone built drums, too, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Buddy Rich thought a lot of him, too.
How about Joe Jones?
Oh, Joe Jones was a dear friend of mine. I met Sid Catlett before I met Joe Jones. But Joe and I we used to see each other in New York all the time. But when I was a teenager, like, he was the only one, you know, Joe. I mean, he was it. He was the master. And he was a very original drummer. Like all the drummers before him in big bands used to have that real tight jump, 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 jump sound, you know, and he had a flowing sound, you know, entirely different sound than the drummers before him. Very original. And he was just great.
How about O'Neill Spencer? Did you ever have an experience with him?
I didn't know him, but he played good brushes, I remember. He played with that little band, right?
Kirby.
Yeah, John Kirby.
Right.
Yeah, he played good on it. And that's one of the few guys that I didn't meet when I was young, you know.
Right. How about Nick Fatul?
Nick, I knew. I liked the way he played a lot. I think he played Slingerland, didn't he?
Played Gretsch for a while.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
I met him. I knew him. Yeah, and I didn't hear him play too much in person, but I heard him on records, and I liked him.
Your styles must be similar because Phil Grant drew a similarity between your two styles.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
It's the first time I ever heard that.
How about Dave Tuff? You mentioned him before. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, well, I took his place on Woody's band.
Uh-huh.
When he got ill, sick, and I, as a matter of fact, the first couple of weeks I played on his drum set because there was a big flood down south, and I couldn't get my drums. I couldn't ship them down there, you know. So I played on his drum till I got back to New York. That was in Georgia where I joined the band.
Now, I believe at the time he was a Gretsch endorser, so...
I think he was, yeah.
So you were using Gretsch drums, but you yourself weren't using Gretsch drums at that time.
No. I was using Ludwig at the time, I think. But later on, I switched to Gretsch, you know, after I got it to New York.
Right. So tell me what it was like to work in Herman's band after Tough. How was that?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the second band better than the first. I enjoyed the Four Brothers band better. But they were both, you know, they were very good bands. But I personally liked the second one because of all those good players, and you know, Stan Getz and Al Cohn and Zoot Sims, and you know, there's not many bands where you get all those players in.
Must have been quite an experience.
Yeah, it was.
Must have been quite an experience to follow Davy Tough too. He was quite a remarkable drummer.
Yeah, he didn't take solos or anything like that, but he had tremendous beat. You know, had a great sense of time, and he knew how to He knew how to play in a band to make it to help the band rather than getting away. You know, and I loved his cymbals, and I loved the way he had his drums tuned. He just had one felt strap on the batter head, and hundreds of strips of adhesive tape across the inside. He was a adhesive tape freak. And nothing on the front head, just that head, but the bass drums sound terrific. And all his drums, he had a good ear for cymbals and drums, you know, for the sounds. He was a little guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to he had terrific power, you know. Like he never hit the drums hard. It's just the way he hit them, you know. He didn't care about doing solos. He just wanted to boot the band, you know, which he did. He didn't play anything fancy. He just had terrific drive and a good beat, you know. There's a lot of difference between time and a beat, you know. It's hard to explain exactly what a beat is, but it's not just playing in time. And he had that secret, you know. The guys told me that some of the guys that were in Benny's band when Krupa was in the band, Jaime Schertzer told me that when Krupa left to start his own band, and Davey came in the band, they said they were so happy they threw him a party.
Who was it that told you this?
Jaime Schertzer. He was the lead alto player with Benny.
Spell his last name for me.
Schertzer. Shertzer.
Okay. Threw a party for him.
Yeah. The whole band threw a party for him. But they liked Gene, but Gene was always playing, you know, showman and all that stuff, and David just sat there and swung the band, you know. They were tickled to death. So I was quite... I was a little bit frightened when I first went on the band, but they made it real easy for me. I didn't have any trouble with it.
You must have had very similar styles, though, because again, Phil Grant said it was a natural for you to follow Davey.
Yeah, well, we did have somewhat the same style, you know, same conception of a time and a beat and swinging, you know. We were pretty similar. He had great taste for it. He was another one who used to he would call a Zildjian factory himself, you know, having a Zildjian, and they'd send him, I don't know how many cymbals, he'd send them all back. He didn't like them all, you know, but he was very fond of Bill Mather too, you know. There was another older man that was very prominent with a lot of drummers, was George Way in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
He had a lot to do with Slingerland drums.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill Mather was the only one that really knew the secret of how they made Zildjian cymbals, other than the family, because he and Abbott and Zildjian were really buddies. And he used to go out on the old man's yacht up New England, you know. But he was, I think all the drummers, all the ones you've named, I think all felt that Mather was, he was something else. He had worked with the Rolls-Royce company in England, in London, before he came over. And during the war, I understand, like he was working in a defense factory in Baltimore, and every once in a while he'd make some parts for drums, because you couldn't get drums during the war, I understand.
Right.
So anyway, he was never tied in with Gretsch. He sold all kind of drums, But at the time I was there at the Royal Roost, that's when Birdland and all that stuff was, and Bop City and all that was going on in New York, And the Royal Roost was right on Broadway, down in the basement, a great big place, and all the bands played there. And I met a lot of people there. Of course, I was around New York for years, and I know everybody on that list that you put down there, everybody, except I didn't know Charlie Watts too well, and I don't know Phil Collins.
Yeah, those are two contemporary guys, that play Gretsch drums. How about Shelly Mann? Tell me a little bit about Shelly Mann.
Oh, Shelly was a good friend of mine. Yeah, we used to play around New York. He got started a little bit before me, He had a little experience with some of the bands a little bit before me, but we were good friends. And now when I was out in California, I used to see him all the time. I was very put out that he died pretty damn young.
Yeah.
And I think it was from that damn horse that kicked him and practically ruined his foot and his ankle.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, he almost took his foot off, That's what I heard. He had horses out there, and one of them kicked the heck out of him. And I think he died from a heart attack, didn't he?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't a blood clot from that. That was a terrible thing to happen to him.
So that was shortly before he died, then, obviously.
Huh?
That was shortly before he died.
Yeah, not too long before he died, I don't know, but it sure sounds logical to me. But he had the West Coast sewed up, and he was good. He was good on Kenton's band, and he played with Will Bradley's band before that when he was just a kid. And I'll tell you one thing about Shelly too. He had I think his mother raised him. I think his father died real young or something, and his mother was quite sickly a lot of her life, and he supported her for years. He really hustled to make some money so he could take care of her. So I had a lot of respect for him. And he played good, too. I liked the way he played.
How about Dick Shanahan with Charlie Burnett?
No, he was with, the first time I heard him, it was Les Brown. I was at the Sherman Hotel in Chicago, and we went in, we had just left there. And we went in, I heard him with Les Brown. I never heard him too much, but the times I did, he sounded okay.
What about George Wetling?
George Wetling I knew real well. Yeah, he was a tasty drummer. As a matter of fact, I was in the hospital for a while, Roosevelt Hospital, and I went to aftercare. Nothing serious, but I went in there, and I used to see him in there. I don't know what he was in there for, but that's the only time I get to see him. He used to play down in the village. He was a little bit ahead of my time, He was with, Bunny Berrigan's band, I think, way back.
Right.
And he used to play down in the village a lot. George was tasty.
There's a name you mentioned before, Kenny Clark, Kluke.
Yeah, Kluke. Yeah, he was a good drummer. He, in that band over in Europe, he had a friend of mine working with him, Kenny Clare, an English drummer. The two of them, I think they had two drummers on the band for a while. And Kenny died too, I'm sorry to say.
Mm-hmm.
But he was over here with Tony Bennett like some years ago. He had a week off, so I invited him down, so he came down and stayed with us for a while. I had met Kenny when I went over there. I did some stuff with George Wein.
Now, this is Kenny Clare that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he liked Kenny Clark a lot. Kenny played really good.
Now, how was it that you used Klug snare drum?
I used his whole set. I was down there at the intermission. He said, well, why don't you try my drum? I said, okay. So I took my drums down, put his up, and it wasn't that the drums were bad, it's just that he tuned them differently from me, you know?
Uh-huh.
And they were wide open, and I couldn't get used to it, so I had to put mine back up there. But there's nothing wrong with the drums, just the way they were tuned, you know?
Right.
Everybody has their own way. Some of them, you know, I used to sit on the street. I was playing with Gretsch on 52nd Street, and Max was playing with Bud Powell and Curly Russell trio. And I played on Max Roach. It was like hitting wood. They were so tight, you know. I couldn't get used to it. Everybody has their own way of tension on drums.
Sure.
And the sounds of cymbals, you know.
Sure.
So we were there for just a week, so I figured, well, what the hell, I'll play on for a week. I started getting used to them after a while, but in the beginning was tough, you know. But Max was always, he was Charlie Parker's favorite drummer.
Yeah, let's talk about him a little bit.
Yeah. Max and I were, later on, in later years, I was studying timpani from an old timpani teacher named Pop Freese. He was in his 90s. He was in Henry Adler's building. And Max was studying timpani from him, too. So we used to pass in the hall, you know, every once in a while. I knew Max way back because Max would be playing with Bird or something. I'd be playing with Stan Getz at Birdland, you know. So I knew Max from way back when he was... First time I heard Max Roach was on 52nd Street. He was with he was with Dizzy, a tenor player, and George Wallington, and what the hell? I'm thinking way back. Oscar Pettiford, the bass player, and he had a beat-up set of drums. I don't think anybody had ever heard of him yet. And he had one cymbal in the middle, and he played with brushes all night. He played great. Of course, he progressed to a different, you know, he started playing more with sticks and cymbals, but he really sounded terrific. And he was just a kid. I think he was 21 or something like that. Very young when I first saw him. And I've known him for years.
Pictured next to you in this ad, I'm looking at your face here from 1954, and right next to you is Louie Bellson. Let's talk about him a little bit.
Oh, he's a sweetheart. He's a technical genius, really. I don't know anybody that doesn't like Louie, you know. He's nice to everybody. I mean, the kids. He's always ready to help people. He's a very unusual guy, and I've known him for, oh God, longer than I knew any of them. I remember seeing him when he was still in the Navy. In Washington, D.C., I was playing in a club there with Charlie Frankhauser, and he was around town, and he used to sit in with a couple of the bands around. And I didn't really meet him too much then, but I think I met him when he was with Benny for a while. And then, of course, I knew him. He was the first one that told me when he was going to get married to Pearl Bailey. I was working a record date with Sauter Finnegan in New York, and he was at Apollo with Duke, and he came down, saw me, and he said, "I'm going to get married now." I said, "No kid," because he never was really hot about dating a lot of chicks and all, you know. He was always practicing the damn drums, you know. So he's the first one told me that he and Pearl were going to get married in London. I said, "Man, that's great, you know." I'll never forget he came down and told me that. I was kind of shocked because, you know, I don't know. It just seems unusual that all of a sudden he's going to get married, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a sweetheart. Yeah, I like him a lot. As a matter of fact, all these guys you got written down here, I was really pretty close with all of them, you know. Except I didn't know Chick Webb, which I regret.
How about Shadow Wilson?
Shadow Wilson, yeah. When I was with Boyd Raven's band, we were at what was then called the Lincoln Hotel in New York, and there's a lot of action on the street there, 52nd Street, you know. So we got Marky Markowitz friend of mine from New York, from Washington, and Earl Swope, who I worked with years on all the different bands. We got to know Dizzy and all the guys on the street, Shadow and all that. So Maria Kramer had that hotel there. So we said, after the place is closed, can we play a little bit if we lock it up? She said, yeah, just be sure that you don't set the place on fire and lock the place before we leave. So Shadow and Dizzy used to come over. We used to play all hours of the night, just sit and blow it, you know. Shadow was great. I first heard Shadow when he was with Earl Hines' band. He sounded a lot like Joe Jones at the time. Shadow was a good drummer.
Natural replacement for Joe and Basie then, right?
Yeah. I heard him later with Basie, but the first time I heard him was with Father Hines, you know. And that's when Charlie Parker and all those different guys were with Earl Hines. Shadow was just a kid when I first saw him. Going back a lot of years.
I was told that Shadow used timpani heads on his bass drum.
I don't know what I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you whether he did or not.
Okay.
I don't even know what kind of drums he used.
Gretsch for a while.
Did he?
Yeah. These are all Gretsch endorsers that I'm rattling off to you. How about Denzel Best?
Denzel, I knew, yeah. I used to see him in New York a lot. I'd see him at Beefsteak Charlie's, you know, it's a bar right across from the stage door, the Capitol. Yeah, I always liked the way he played. He was a very tasty drummer. A lot of them died too young, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Denzel was a very tasty drummer with the brushes.
What about Mel Lewis?
Mel was a good drummer, yeah. Mel was liked by an awful lot of guys. I knew him. I didn't know him too well until he came back to New York. And then I used to see him all the time, you know, Jim and Andy's and all those places. He was doing a lot of work around and hooked up with Thad Jones, and that was a hell of a band. Mel was he didn't clutter things up, you know. He was a good timekeeper, good drummer. It's too bad Sid Catlett wasn't on that list because I was closer to him than my own father.
Really?
Yeah, Sid Catlett and I we were really close.
Quite a drummer.
I met him before I met any of these guys. And he was what a lovely guy, you know. And what a genius drummer. He could play any style, you know, like he played Dixie, he played big band, he played, well, you know, he was on Hot House, you know, that Bop record. He sounded as good as Max or anybody's. You know, he could play any style. And he learned how to twirl the sticks and all that from Chick Webb, he told me. And they all tell me, like I asked Artie Shaw once when I was doing the album for him, I said, you know, I always regret that I never met or heard Chick Webb in person. He said, well, you missed one of the greatest, you know. He told me, like, he used to go up to uptown to hear his band. He said he'd stand right in front of the band. He said he'd take that bass drum right in the belly. And Chick said that Chick, in the intermission, he'd cover up his snare drum with a big cloth or something so nobody could see how he tuned his drum. He said, but he was fantastic. I heard some records of him way back, but when he made records, that, you know, the technique of making records was not near what it was a few years later, you know.
Right.
But he, just from the things I heard, you knew that he was a hell of a player, you know. And Benny Goodman used to tell me that when he had the band, he'd meet Chick Webb on the street someplace, and Chick would be thrilled to death because he got a new arrangement for his band, you know. And Benny liked him a lot. I never saw him in person. I always regretted that.
How about Art Blakey?
Art Blakey and I used to work Birdland together. That's before he even had a group. He'd work with different people. You know what they paid at Birdland? when we were working Birdland, $18 a night.
Get out of here.
That's right. And that's, you know, all this. And he was working in a warehouse in the daytime because he had a lot of kids to support. He was hauling sacks all day long in the warehouse, and they'd come down and play Birdland at night.
Hauling sacks or what?
He was a laborer in the daytime to make extra money. Blakey was. So he started at 9:30, played at 3:30 or 10 to 4, and that was $18. And that was everybody except the leaders, like, you know. There wasn't much money going on. They didn't pay any money. They still don't pay any money in those jazz places.
Wow.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, who were you playing with when you saw when you were there with?
Most of the time, Stan Getz.
Yeah. Who was Blakey with? Do you recall?
Oh, he played with different guys. We all played with different guys a lot. No, wasn't any set groups. You know, he just got hired for the night. You know, whoever was the so-called star, they'd get who they wanted, and that was the band they had. You know, I played Al Haig and Tommy Potter. I played with a lot with Stan Getz. And I'll never forget one time, Stan would always start out the set with "You Stepped Out of a Dream." He used to love that tune, you know. So we're playing along like that. There was little steps in the back of the bandstand, and I looked over and there's Charlie Parker there with his horn out, see. So he gets stand on him scene. So he's playing, and then the piano starts playing, and Charlie gets up on the stand. Stan said, "Jesus, where'd you come from?" So they're playing that tune, and Stan says, "Come on, play." And he says, "No, I want to hear the piano player play a couple of courses because I don't know that tune that well." So Al Haig played a couple more courses, and then Charlie got up there and he tore that thing up. You know, he just listened to 2 courses of Al Haig, and Stan looking at me and said, "Jesus, I don't believe this guy," you know. But Charlie Parker was a wonderful player.
Who else was in the band at that time besides Al Haig and yourself and Stan Getz? What?
That's all, just a quartet.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Who was playing bass?
I think Tommy Potter.
I'm
not sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different guys. Curly Russell was a wonderful guy. He played with Max Roach and Bud Powell all the time, you know, with Bird, you know. I had a wonderful relationship with Bud Powell. One time I was working down there, we had Earl Swope and Serge Sherloff, and just a put together band, you know, and Bud was there. God, he played so marvelous. He was one of my all-time favorites. He had tremendous, great beat, good time, and all, you know. Loved the way he played solos. You know. Because a lot of these guys, I wouldn't see them for months because we all went in different directions, you know. But I used to see Klug a lot. I used to see Mel a lot. Philly Joe I used to see. Elvin I used to see. Art Blakey. Joe, yeah. And Louis. I saw most of them pretty often around New York.
I get the feeling that Duke Kramer, Phil Grant, had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, everybody seemed to like Phil a lot, you know. He was a down-home guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Quite a colorful character, too.
Yeah. Well, he got sick of the rat race, I think, and I think he just went up to Vermont. He told me he always wanted to do that.
Yeah, once Gretsch sold out to Baldwin, the company, I guess, kind of went into a tailspin. And
yeah, well, I think Phil had a lot to do with keeping that company in good shape, you know. Because as I say, the Gretsch himself didn't know a damn thing about drugs. He was a banker. But they, you know, I think Phil was really responsible for getting most of these guys. Because, you know, I tell you, when you get down to it, there's very little difference in a lot of drums, you know that?
Right,
it's
right.
The way you tune them.
Exactly.
You know, I've used every kind. The first drums I ever had was Slingerland. Then I used Ludwig. Then I used Leedy. Then WFL, Gretsch, Sonar, and Pearl. I'm using Pearl right now.
Uh-huh.
So I've used them all, you know. So it's and I use a Roger snare drum that I like very much, you know. So I've used them all, and it's not it's whatever you. They're very similar, you know.
Right.
There's a big difference in cymbals and all that, but all drums are practically. You can practically make them all sound alike, you know.
Exactly.
I've found that anyway.
Well, I think that's why, you know, that's what Gretsch really capitalized on, was getting the image, you know, of all these great players.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, the other companies had great players too, obviously, but
yeah.
Gretsch sure had the numbers. I mean, like I said, I'm looking at this ad that was in Downbeat 54. And,
yeah.
you know, just a whole page full of guys and just great drummers. I mean, there you are next to Louis Bellson, and Art Blakey's on your right. Mel Lewis is next to him. And, you know, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
But get back to some of these names. Next one I had on my list here was Charlie Perry.
Yeah, Charlie Perry I knew well. Yeah, he teaches mostly now out in Long Island, I think. But I heard him. He was a good drummer. He wasn't really a great drummer, I didn't think, but he was a good drummer. A lovely guy.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely guy. He played with some bands around. The times I was playing Birdland and all that, he was playing with different groups around. You know, there was an awful lot of work around that.
I just got a few more names here. I've taken up a lot of your time.
That's all right.
Sonny Payne.
Sonny Payne was a gasser, boy. Basically used to love him. I heard him a lot when Basie was playing Birdland with a big band. He was a very flashy drummer, a good drummer. He was a character, boy. We used to come up to the Union to get checked. He'd come up in a riding habit, riding boots. He was a good little drummer. He's dead. He's dead too.
Right. A riding hat and riding boots.
A riding habit, you know.
Oh.
He used to ride horses and all, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I used to know. I heard him. He was damn good. He really, he was very fiery for that band. You know, I know that Basie loved him.
You call him the spark plug of the band.
Yeah, he really was too.
Now you say he'd come to the reunions. What reunions were they?
No, I told you he used to come up to the Union.
Oh, the Union. I'm sorry.
You know?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he'd be standing, and I'd meet him up there for once in a while.
Huh.
Wasn't planned, just happened to run into him.
Right.
You know?
Right. How about Art Taylor?
I don't know his work that much, but I understand he's very popular with a lot of guys.
How about Charlie Persip?
Charlie Persip's a good friend of mine. Yeah, Charlie Persip he's got phenomenal technique. And I used to work down here at the top of the world, you know, at Disney. And he came down with Billy Eckstein. We got together. I know Charlie a long time. And Charlie used to be one of the guys who used to play down Birdland, too, for $18 a night.
I'm sorry to laugh, but that just tickles me. You know, here's,
Ridiculous?
I mean, you know, this is the epitome of the jazz mecca of the world, and you guys are only making $18 a night.
That's all.
Oh. Tell me about some of the other clubs there. Now, you mentioned the Royal Roost.
Yeah, and Pop City.
Now, these were all on 52nd Street?
No, on Broadway.
Broadway.
Yeah. The Embers was on the east side. The Round Table was on the east side. Those were the most jazz clubs. And then they had, you know, the jazz clubs down in the Village. But I never worked down there too much.
The Village Vanguard? Did you ever?
Yeah, I worked there a
Yeah.
couple of times. And the Village Gate.
Yeah.
But I worked more at Birdland and Pop City and the Round Table and all that, you know. Worked with a lot of people in those clubs, right in Manhattan. Upper Manhattan was great. But I really didn't make any money. I didn't make any money there until I started doing some studio work, you know.
Right.
Couldn't make a living. You had to travel and all that if you wanted to make a living just playing jazz, you know.
Right. Now, were you married at the time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure was. That's one reason I got into the studio, but, you know, I had to do something where I could make a living. So, you know, in those days when you get on the staff, boy, I mean, you're really making it then, you know. But the only place you make any money in New York now is the Broadway theaters.
Right.
Nothing going on in New York City. And you just catch what you can, unless you're working steady for the shows. That's about the only place you can make a decent living. And then you don't know how long the show's going to go. But there used to be, when I first went to New York, there was 60 men on all the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and then some of the lesser networks, there was 40 men on it. And then
You're talking just musicians?
yeah,
On staff with each of the networks, there was 40 men?
60 men. Each one had staff musicians at the time. When I first got back to New York, you couldn't get to all the work. There's so much, And then the lesser stations had 40 men, WOR and NEW and all that, But the three major networks all had 60 or 65 men on staff. But they didn't pay any money, $240 a week. Back then, that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was, sure.
But now it's nothing,
Oh, yeah, well, but it sure beat $18 a night.
Sure did, yeah.
Yeah, you get one of those gigs, you were probably doing pretty well.
That's right.
Well, Mr. Lamond, I really appreciate your taking the time here to share some of your memories with me. That's
okay.
It's really
if you need to know something else, just feel free.
All right, I'll do that.
All right.
All right, Mr. Lamond.
Have good luck with your book.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.